So I turned the oven up as high as it could, and I just ran. You're listening to the Beat Motel podcast, and we need to warn you that we like to use words like fuck, shit, and syndicalist, boxy scrutux, angry flap, and filth biscuits. And we don't often bleep those words out, apart from because we're not complete animals. But if you understand that and you like music, then listen on.
This is one of the best intros you've ever done.
Oh, people who are just on audio, you missed a treat. I'm making myself coffee. I've got an AeroPress, and like Sam's face watching it, it looked like you're watching something sexual that you didn't know why you liked it, like it was awakening something in you.
It just made me think about I thought the first thing was...
Oh shit, sorry. You're listening to Beat Motel. It's such a classic
Welcome
start.
to the Professional Beat Motel podcast. No, I thought firstly your introduction was a bit of a game changer because the music that you use fit very well with the bit of the story that you gave us. So I like that. And also then the AeroPress was just sort of unexpected. And then the struggle you had with pressing it down was also very enjoyable.
Oh man, we have fun, don't we? Well, the thing is, I decided like the last few kind of like teaser intro things. Apparently, they're quite a good thing to do to get more listeners and subscribers, and our subscribers have actually gone up recently, so maybe it's working. But I was just thinking they're getting more and more lewd. And I was in like a business thing yesterday and meeting someone, and it's like, oh, I do a podcast, and I was thinking, do I really want to tell her what it's called? Then I sort of thought back to all those intros, and the one I was gonna say today was, if it goes that pink, you've got to stop flicking it. And I just thought, no, I'm going to try and do clean ones. I'll try and do ones in future that actually kind of fit in with the with the music, which is Zeeb, if anyone wants to know. Right, we are a music podcast, so should we have a riff, Dr. Sam?
I'll go for it. Yeah, sure.
Here's a riff. Oh. Who was that?
That was I've only just learned about this band, The Faint, with Agenda Suicide. They are a band. I don't know if they're still going, but they're one of those bands that I get, credit to Tidal, Daily Discovery Tidal. All the rest of all of it, all the other sort of 7-8 songs that they suggested, I'd either heard or didn't really care about. And then this is just like, spot on for me. And it's another band that I missed. They were sort of, I guess, I think they may be still around a little bit, but they were, shall we call them ambitious around the turn of the century.
Oh, bloody hell. That sounds so ahead of its time for that.
And they sort of did this electro dance punk thing, and it's less grating than the Rapture, I would say. And it's more, I've yet to investigate them, but just this song came on. I'm just like, what's not to be sold on if you? And but also going, how were they not a bigger thing? What did I miss in the year 2022?
There is a lot of music in the world.
There's a lot of music in the world, but you think that is to me, that is in the wheelhouse. That's sort of in the same building as, say, punk. Most punk rock going on around that point, American stuff. So they never got massive, but it was still a bit surprised that they've never come across them.
When the song starts, that throbbing bass is amazing. these headphones that I'm wearing are they're monitoring headphones, so they're flat response. So you hear things as they should be. Most headphones have or basically all headphones are bass boosted, and despite the fact these are flat response headphones, that bass is really, really deep, really deep. And I almost want to know how they do it, because when you master stuff, when you mix stuff, you generally have to cut out anything below 100 hertz.
Yeah.
Because it just makes things muddy. It interferes with everything else. So when people actually manage to create something that low, it's like almost academically interesting to me. But the song starts, and like the bass, I'm like, I like the bass. That little chicka 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 guitar starts, like, I like that type of guitar. And then like a fall to the floor kick, dum dum dum. I was like, well, I like fall to the floor kicks. I love kind of dirty, grotty techno. And then the sort of almost childlike toy keyboard synth sound. So I was like, well, I like that kind of synth sound. I was like, okay, all the ingredients are here. Everything's here.
Can you play the second half of it again?
I can only play it. I can't. It's either all or nothing, I'm afraid. So let's have from the start anyway, because it is good. Makes my knees feel funny.
I really like how that keyboard, that synth riff, keeps sort of changing slightly. It keeps going back onto the riff, but then it keeps going slightly, like you only get 2 repetitions of that in that 30 seconds, but you still get 2 repetitions that vary. Or is it 2 repetitions? Maybe it's like, but there's enough, like, it keeps sort of recentering itself and then going a bit off piste and then recentering itself. And it's sort of like, there's a threat of like, slightly the threat of chaos is there, I think, particularly with that bass sound as well. There's something, I think, going back to what you were saying about like how do you get an instrument sort of to sound that low without it being muddying everything. There's an aspect of there's a sound like there's a slightly almost barely held together aspect to the sound that they have, I think.
It's also got a really clever thing. I'd love to know what the influences are, because doing that kind of thing is what we do when we make techno. The assumption is, for anyone who probably doesn't like techno, it's just dum dum dum. Yeah, Sam puts his hand up. It's just dum dum dum. Yeah, and that is kind of the root of it.
Boots and cats boots and cats.
What you do with I've not figured out where to put the cats yet when I make techno. Anyway, what you do is it's all about putting ear candy in, putting in slight evolutions, things that constantly change, because otherwise you'd be bored of all techno within the first 2 bars, which I think, Sam, you possibly are. But when you sort of start to unpick the layers of it, it's really, really clever, and it becomes really, really interesting. So I'd be interested to know what the influences were. The good news I've got for you, Sam, is that, well, and for me and for the world, is that they are still an active band. They started in 1995. So that track, did you say it was like 2002
or something like that?
Yeah, 2002. And in 2004, they got a new guitarist who played in the death metal band Lead.
Oh, I've heard
and one of the original members of The Faint was Conor Oberst of Bright Eyes, which isn't a band that I'm massively into, but very, very kind of indie royalty. And they toured Europe and the USA with Ladytron, which again, another Six Music friendly kind of type of act. Whenever I say that, it sounds like I'm saying it's a bad thing. It's not. I listen to Six Music all day, every day. But yeah, interesting stuff. I like that, and I always say I'm going to look up more of that, and I will, because I get the thing, the Rapture LCD sound system type, spacious electronica mixed with live instruments kind of thing. I'd love to start a band like that, but I won't. Right, so as we're talking about things evolving and never quite repeating, listen to the bass for my riff of the week. I initially chose it because it's just a nice bass riff, but listen to it as it evolves.
If you get out before September, remember that I'm still inside, but I'm dry, and you, when you try to make a difference, yes, so.
That is. Do you want to guess who that is? I like this game. Do you want to guess who that was?
Oasis?
Oh, fuck hell, no. Fucking Oasis. Sometimes I can't tell if you're just trying to be funny or if you want to see if that's a serious guess.
No, that was a wind-up.
Okay, fine. That's the Bluetones with their song If. But I chose it because Emma's going through my wife's going through a Bluetones thing at the moment, so it's on quite a lot. And that, I always assumed, without really paying attention, I assumed that lovely opening bass line goes throughout the song, and it doesn't at all. It's like I think it's a cracking riff. I'm just going to play a little tiny bit of it. It's just such a nice little riff. Yeah. But as soon as the song comes in, you never hear it again, ever. I mean, like, that's almost kind of like showy to me, almost kind of ballsy to go, look, I can just pour riffs out, haven't even got to use them for the whole song. I'll just chuck it away as an intro, which I think that's cool. But then as the song progresses...
It's a lovely chord progression.
It is, isn't it? But as the song progresses, the bass doesn't just follow the route. And when it loops round and you expect it to come back, excuse me, you expect it to come back to the same note because the chord progressions come round. It doesn't. It drops, and the next time it comes around, it starts to go up again. It's really, I admire the sort of the musical competence and confidence of a bassist to play that way. Absolute joy. I like music.
In a way, the bass tone controls what the chord is.
Ooh, that's really interesting.
So the guitarist, it's like if you have something, I think that sort of that's sort of something I thought about. No, this is sort of the limits of my musical theory, but there is an aspect of you control at least the voicing of the chord, but with the bass tone. Like if you have a C major chord, and instead of playing C, you have G in the bass, it sounds very different to if you have C in the bass.
Harmonics.
Yeah.
See, look, if anyone listens to this and say we don't expand their mind, you just talked about music theory, so fuck them.
I'm sure the 5 people who play in bands who sometimes listen to us have more musical theory than I do.
I literally have never given playing bass any thought with that regard. I play bass just because it's just a hole that appears in bands that no one else wants to fill. So I'm just quite happy to do it. We ought to get onto our theme. What's our theme this week, Sam?
We've gone and repeated because I got jealous and I wanted to do music that changed our lives. And so we're returning to a subject that you covered 2 weeks ago.
Well, it's slightly different because we called that one Songs That Change the Way You Think, whereas when you sent over the clips, you called it Bands That Changed My Life, and I prefer that. I think that's that's nice. I like that. So I'm going to play the first band that changed your life. Bitch. Is that vocals at the end there going?
Yeah. We're saying something. I don't know what you're saying. That's Cold Chamber with, you'll be surprised by the title track, Big Truck.
Big Truck.
And I'm not sure if I mean, this is sort of that thing of going. I'm not sure. I wouldn't say Cold Chamber changed my life, but they are basically a less obvious sort of nod to new metal. And I come from, I was a teenager in the late '90s,
I
and
was a teenager in the late 90s.
like there's an aspect of unluckiness in a way that the previous like you in the UK, you got your indie, you got to be like a cool indie sort of world, and in America previously there was like the grunge world, and then there was the pop punk world, and what was big when I was fucking 13? Fucking new metal. Or what was becoming big? What was becoming big? But that was the point. It's like it's the music that me and a few friends got to claim as our own that pissed off everybody else. It was like so good at fucking everybody else over and making everybody else so irately angry because of the rhythmic. I'd say the rhythmically, actually, new metal sort of not given the credit for being as complex as it is because it's, I think, rhythmic quite clever music, but melodically, it's fucking dumb as shit. It is guitars tuned down to G, to D or something, and it's basically, or A, I think in this case, and it's basically, the opening string and then the first fret.
But I'm not a fan of new metal, but I quite like that kind of band just sort of stripped out all the superfluous stuff. I mean, the production's there to make it sound meaty. Sounds like it's been done on a Pultec compressor to my ears. Anyone listening who actually understands mixing will go, he's full of shit. Only partially. But who cares if it's dumb? Who cares if it's basic? It came at a time where if you think ridiculousness and unnecessary layers of crap was ramping up in the 80s, and then grunge smashed it back down. And then bands like, I'm going to be so unpopular for saying this, bands like Pearl Jam and the band that did Black Hole Sun, all those bands start to gradually just sort of introduce these things back in again. And by the sort of mid to late 90s, it kind of felt at the time like we were back to where we were 10 years ago. And then new metal came in and just bashed it all down again. It's sort of like a ramping up and a bashing down. And because music's not as tribal as it was, I don't think there's been any new genre pop up to really smash everything down again. I'm not sure that'll ever happen again.
No, I mean, this is there was on this topic. There was I was listening to the BBC News World Service podcast on my bike rides
You're a cool bastard, you are.
Yeah, I tend to. This is how I start my bike rides. I listen to half an hour of news. Half an hour of world news, courtesy of
always
the
like
BBC.
See people on when you do sportives, you do like 100-mile rides. You always see people go past with headphones on, and you can hear like this techno going as they go past. Somebody goes past, they'll just hear like Eddie Mayer going blah, 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 blah.
There was a thing about they had a thing about festivals that focus on nostalgia doing much better than festivals that focus on new bands.
Oh God!
And one of the reasons, and I think one of the reasons, is that we don't have this centralized sort of popular music world anymore. So, like, sometimes you think, Taylor Swift is massive, and then you have a few other people who are massive, but they're so far and few between. Whereas it used to be much more diverse. It used to be, and you get massive bands coming out every so often, every few years, and now you don't get that because there isn't that mainstream ability to control things. So we're left basically, in my reading of the world, is that we're left with these nostalgia acts as the only bands that can commandeer those sorts of audiences. Because if you look at the metal festivals that we did a few months ago, when we were talking about I was bashing on about fucking Slayer coming back, and these festivals, they could rely on the nostalgia acts a bit, but they weren't necessarily all that was there.
Mhm.
Whereas now it is mostly young bands making up most of it, but then the headliners are always these things that made their name in a previous age of how music was sold. And we are missing that. We're missing those sort of like those big acts that tend to take over the genre for a bit. And it's a shame because live music, like who really, I mean, do you really want to go and see someone in some geriatric sort of stumbling across the stage? Or do you want to see someone who actually who can still play, and
I
it
want to
really
see. I
wants
want to
to
see
be
new
there?
things.
Yeah.
I like the old things, but I'm not really one for nostalgia. I say that I'm going to see the Bluetones in a couple of weeks, but they never they never went away. They stayed current, is my argument, and also they're playing in a 100 capacity venue, which is going to be brilliant. See, that's the thing I like when bands in the mainstream get less popular but stay good, and then you can see them. You don't have to go to a festival, you don't have to go to an arena to see them. You can pay like £7.50 to see them in a pub. I quite like that if they're still good. Otherwise, it can just be the saddest thing
It
ever.
must be quite difficult for them. They've gone from probably making quite decent pocket in. Why did I say pocket money?
Say making pocket blood.
Making pocket, gangster in it, bruv. I'm too white for this conversation.
Just the way you said gangster was like the least gangster thing I think I've ever heard.
Gangster, darling.
At least I've got the rough and ready Ipswich accent.
Your wife sounds more Ipswich than you do.
She sounds more Suffolk.
More Suffolk.
There is a difference. Yeah, Ipswich is like lazy Suffolk, and bear in mind, rural Suffolk's basically just a.
You grew up in rural Suffolk, didn't you?
I did, yeah, and I don't know why I sound like a posho sometimes.
I think it's the amount of Radio 4 your parents listen to.
I can distinctly remember when Radio Suffolk became a thing, and suddenly there were Suffolk voices on the radio. There's some quite famous ones. There's I'm trying to remember what his name is. It's like Roy from Melton or something, who used to ring up, and it turned out he was actually a comedian, and he was like ringing. He was basically trolling the station, and they found out, and essentially just went, "Well, it's really funny. Can you just carry on?" I'm going to have to look up his name. Coal Chamber. I do remember seeing them in magazines at the time. And I remember my overriding opinion of them is that they just looked a bit mucky.
it's the whole thing of like, nu metal really exploded at the end of the 90s, sort of 1999 really is the nu metal year. But yeah, it was like, that's the deal I was dealt as a teenager, as a kid into alternative music, is that's my generation. And it fucked my parents off. It pissed my brother off. My brother 2 years older than me, he didn't get it at all.
I can't think of any other genre that throughout my life would have had that effect. I mean, punk is before my time, really. Like the 70s punk is just before my time. But I can't think of anything
frankly, it never re-emerged that much into the mainstream. It already had a load of set of values, and nu metal was an amalgamation of different sort of currents of like, there's an element of goth in it. There's an element of, hip hop rhythms. There's an element of groove metal in it, and then there's an element of sort of grungy, grunge vocal sort of, for lack of a better word, authenticity to the delivery and the lyrics. At least, like, there's no filter in a way. And it spoke, I think, it reflected very much, like, at least sort of, yeah. So it's what we were given, what I was dealt, and it changed my life, because everything else before that had been other people's music and was given to me by other people rather than something I could claim as my generation.
That's a really interesting thing. So music you discovered entirely by yourself. God, that'd be a difficult topic to do, I think. But it's interesting because new metal pissed everyone off. It pissed off other people who were really into music.
It pissed off. There are people there were pioneers of studying heavy metal in academia who refused to admit new metal was a form of heavy metal.
Let's move on. I was going to just talk about new metal for absolutely ages, and I'm fine with that, and you're fine with that. So we could if we wanted to, but instead, let's do something else.
Yeah, it got shit when Slipknot got together. Move on.
See, in my mind, that's right at the start. That's right at the start.
That's the point I started to go off the boil.
Oh, bloody hell, how wonderfully elitist. Right, I'm going to play...
new metal purist here.
New metal purist. Oh, wow. Right, I'm going to play the track.
Deftones are shit as well.
Pardon?
The Deftones are shit as well. After Around the Fur. Which I have problems with. And I have problems with their misogyny. Then there's loads of homophobia in new metal as well, and all that.
That's the thing. It's not just the music. It's not just the dumbing down. It's not just the making things basic. There are things that are still problematic about it that you can't even say. Oh, it's a different time, which I think is the shittest argument against any ism there is. But anyway, let's play something jolly, and I'm going to try and do something clever. I'm going to try and clip something at the same time, so this might go horribly wrong. That was, go on, have a guess, and it's not Oasis.
Stone Roses?
Oh, you see, still don't know if you're winding me up or not.
No, that was a genuine guess. I don't know. This is how little my knowledge of that era of music is.
Okay, well, that is the Charlatans.
The Charlatans.
Okay. Which, I mean, out of the two, the Charlatans are... At the time, I was far more obsessed with the Stone Roses, but... The Charlatans are the ones who I still like listening to, and looking back, they are far better musicians. They blended basically soul with vaguely Deep Purple kind of raging Hammond organs. It's not very raging because it was the 90s and it was made nice and had to be dancey and whatever. But that song is called Then. It's not like one of their real big hits, but it's the song that I remember coming out, and I can clearly remember being at a friend's house and hearing that because they had older sisters. That's such a classic route into music, like either your own older siblings or someone else's. And I can remember hearing that, and I became obsessed, like from the second I heard it. And I'd always been aware of music, and my dad's music taste, I think, is kind of all right. It's a kind of dad rock, I guess you could call it, but also some more interesting kind of aspects of 60s psychedelia and stuff. So I used to pretend to play guitar in my room and all that stuff, but I heard that, and that was the first time I just went, I want to make music. So that is the song that fucked up my entire life.
Were the Charlatans like a noted band at the time, or were they just sort of a struggling band on the cusps of Enemy and stuff like that?
I didn't realise until... The singer's called Tim Burgess. I didn't realise until I read his autobiography just how massive they were. They were certainly... I judged everything based on how often people were talked about in the NME and Melody Maker and Select and Q and whatever. And they were always there. But when I read the autobiography, I found out that the first album essentially made them all multi-millionaires. They were big, 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 big. The debut album got to like number 2 in the UK charts, or possibly number 1, at a time where to get to number 1, you had to sell a lot of records. And they had a dip with the second album, so much so that the bassist ended up being sectioned, and it's because he blamed himself for only going gold instead of platinum. One of those things you kind of go, whoa, wow, really? But who knows? Everyone judges things
Back then,
in
that
their own way.
was probably a big concern.
Then they've sort of stayed consistent, but I didn't realize how many records they sell. There's in the book, they signed to Sony sometime around. They were on Beggar's Banquet, and then they signed to Sony sometime around 5th album. They're like, with the advance from Sony, we built our own recording studio. And you're like, okay, well, if you're getting that kind of advance, you're clearly still selling a lot of records. But I still love that Hammond organ sound. I just, when we were that age, we used to go into. There was a place in Ipswich that sold organs. Don't look for it now; it's long gone.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
And they clearly sold them to churches and stuff. But we used to go in and hassle the poor guy who ran the place. Go, can you play something on a Hammond organ? We'd all start dancing around the shop and stuff because of the Charlatans. But I'm going to take a slight side step here because I talked about Radio Suffolk, and this will either work or won't. But I found I've made a clip of Brian from Melton. So if you want to hear a proper Suffolk accent, so this is a BBC Suffolk host talking to Brian from Melton.
Morning, Leslie.
Good morning. How's your week been?
Never mind about my ruddy week. What the hell is going on? The girl Rosemary this morning, she was banging on the door. 6:30. I was up, but I was still in my pajamas. So I went through. I said, "What's the matter? Is the house on fire?" She said, "No." She said, "He's gone." I said, "Who's gone?" She said, "Mark." And I said, "I don't know."
Gone.
In my pajamas, they call it the tortured vowel. Pajamas.
Tortured vowel.
I don't know if I've just made that up. If I have, I'm more of a genius.
That's Tortured Vowel is my favourite band name of the day. After which
Tortured Vowel, the black metal, death metal
Tortured
version.
Vowel. The other one is the anal father of postmodernity.
Anal father.
I can explain that one, but I don't know why it's anal, but I think that's because it comes from psychoanalysis, which is tortured in itself.
Right, let's go for your next choice. I could be at a pub somewhere in the mosh, jumping around, getting beer and fag ash on me, falling over, being picked up by friends, and having a bloody great big headache the next morning to that band. Who was that?
That was the Newtown Grunts, and the song was Out the Crowd, and they were I think they were from a town called Glendrofus in north of Edinburgh, and they had 3 singers. That was just quite a unique thing for them, for bands.
3
at the time.
singers.
Yeah, they had the clean sounding bloke. They had a female sort of singer, and they had a rough, gruff sounding guy, and they all sang in their accents, which was, so they weren't trying to become Americanized. But you could certainly understand the clean singer and the woman more than you could understand the gruff guy.
What year is this?
This is late 90s, 2000s.
There's so many bands, and I'm going to say so many American bands who sound like they might have been influenced by Newtown Grunts.
They're not, though.
Oh, no?
The Newtown Grunts... So the Newtown Grunts were... The reason I chose them was they were the first band... So I heard about them through my brother who was at university in Edinburgh at the time, and they were sort of the Newtown Grunts were apparently sort of a well-known thing on the Edinburgh scene, and they weren't very well known in the UK, the rest of the UK, and like of that generation, there was a band called Ex Cathedra. Do you remember Ex Cathedra?
I do. Were they like Southend sort of way?
No, they were
Where are
Scottish
they
as
from?
well.
Oh, well, got that about as wrong as you possibly can.
Yeah, so Ex Cathedra.
I'm sure I knew their drummer. I could be
Anarcho
completely
band,
wrong.
punk band from Glasgow. Yeah, they're an anarcho band, and it was sort of like there was a thing. There was something in one of their albums, because Newtown Grunts album, going, they fucking know who we are, Ex Cathedra, because they sort of really looked up to them. But also the Newtown Grunts knew the singer a little bit, and he was a really sweet guy, and he was, as a chef in a pub or something like that. And
They never made it massive then.
They never made it massive, and all their music came out through DIY stuff. They toured the UK with in their van. They would put in boxes of Buckfast and hand round this is proper pre-COVID days. Hand round bottles of Buckfast to the crowd whilst they were playing, and
That's
they
how
would
you get
drink. Everybody,
cooties.
everybody would drink with the crowd. I mean, Buckfast would probably kill it, whatever was in there as well. And they were great sort of fun live band. But also that album was one of my favourite albums. Was it the Newtown?
They still going?
No, they're not.
I can see how bands like that just get knackered.
Yeah, they were. The album was called Disgruntled. It came out in 2001. It is a brilliant album. You can pick it up for around £5 on Tinternet. They have a great song that I've got played on this before, which is called The Newtown Grunts versus the Insidious Right-Wing Conspiracy. And
Great title.
And they were the band that broke the link between popularity and quality for me.
Ah, right. I was going to say, what is it about them that changed your life?
So I loved that album, and I loved everything about that Disgruntled album. And they were the band. Yeah, they really broke that link. Because I saw them in a venue in Brighton free, but it wasn't sold out. It was a few, maybe 100 and something people, playing to nobody, but it was the fucking greatest place to be. It was the greatest place, it's that against me thing of like, there's nowhere else in the world to be apart from
nowhere else I'd rather be.
Yeah. In that world, and therefore that was the punk. That's the punk rock moment. Saved my life, or changed my life, or ruined my life, whichever you want to put it. But that was the point where I went, I don't really care about numbers because people are missing out on this, and this is fucking genius. And it wasn't. They were never, to my mind, they were never covered in the alternative press magazines. They were probably barely covered in fanzines. They were a DIY punk band without much of a following, but they were doing fucking great things. And, that's that thing of we miss out so much because if we rely on marketing people to sell us things, we're never going to actually get what the potential of things are.
It's still why the underground, if the underground still exists, is such a cool thing.
I think the underground exists more than ever in a way, but I think it exists more of a capitalist market space than it did back in the 2000s. I think there's less of a community around it.
Yeah, as I've said before, I think music's less tribal. I'm going to play something that probably is a bit more tribal. starts cutting it off there. Don't believe them, don't be bitten twice. You got to sus. Go on, Sam, who's that?
That's Stiff and the Little Fingers.
I thought you were going to say Oasis.
That's Oasis.
You just couldn't. No, I can't.
That was
bring
early.
myself to
That was early Oasis. That was when they were good, before they sold out and got shit.
So Suspect Device by Stiff Little Fingers.
So that's like, when was that album made? Because that's got to be one of the greatest punk rock albums ever.
I'm going to guess 78, and then I'm going to look it up. I chose that because genuinely changed my life. I was at college. I was sat on the steps.
79.
The smoking steps, we called them. They were like the steps by the refectory. And there was this punk kid. I mean, like proper like mohawk, leather jacket type punk kid. And I cannot fucking remember why, but I went and sat next to him and started speaking to him. Probably just that's the kind of type of person I am. And we got chatting, and it turns out we used to catch the same bus home. He lived in Woodbridge, I lived in Wickham, so he was on the bus. And one day he gave me a tape and he said, I'm going to start a band. This is the sort of thing I want to play. And he was a drummer. And he said, I found a guitarist who can play 2 para chords. I still don't know if he meant power chords, probably. And he found the guitarist.
Paratrooper chords that only paratroopers can play.
He found a guitarist from. There used to be a big group of basically street drinking punks. Used to sit on the Cornhill, sit in the middle of Ipswich on the steps to the bank drinking cider. And I was really scared of them at the time. And I can remember this was the first song. And he said, there's a bit in this in the middle that is exactly the sort of thing I want to play. And I was like, oh, bloody punk. Like punk to me, I'd heard 999. Obviously, I knew who the Sex Pistols were, and Clash weren't at that time, were of no interest. And I was really like, oh man, so who's this kid that I've accidentally made friends with? And when he got off the bus, I put the tape in my personal tape player, and if it was in a film, it would have been one of those bits like, you know, in Jaws, where like the background, where the person like isn't moving, but they appear to like loom, they get separated from the background, a perspective split thing. It would have been like that. I would have just like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing I've ever heard. And we did form a band, and that band was called Junk Culture, which is why I'm Andrew Culture. And I'm still where I work. The singer and guitarist of that band also work. Johnny, the drummer, I haven't seen for a while, but I'm still seeing his parents quite often, and absolutely ruined my life. That one song just absolutely ruined my life, because I think in reality, the band I was in at the time with childhood friends was they'd had enough of me. Speaking quite candidly, I think they'd had, because I was the year above them, and I'd joined college and I was making new friends, and they were just, you know, it's how those separations naturally happen. So that's why. What an album! What an amazing song!
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the wonderful thing about. That's the most exciting moment of being. For me, that was the best point of being a teenager and being in my early 20s, that you did get these things that made your brain just, you know, all of a sudden, all these like dead parts of your brain came alive.
Oh, that's a lovely way of describing it.
And you know, things that you've never used before, and your brain just goes, yes, this is it. This is like even listening to that little bit, there's like a, I don't know, dopamine hit of excitement with it. It's like my brain just wants to go and listen to the rest of the fucking album and jump around. I remember when I went to see the Sex Pistols with my friend Lawrence in Brixton Academy. He just went, "I'll see you at the end," and he just ran into the pit. And he's just the guy, and you know, he must have been about in his 40s at that point.
Who did you go see?
Sex Pistols.
Oh right, yeah.
And it was that, you know, that aspect of like his brain just went, this is it just, you know, turns you into that person. And it's, you know, his brain must have just been making all those connections. Like he says, he says he can never listen to the Sex Pistols without sort of getting that anxiety and like being a teenager and that sort of aggressiveness. and the Sex Pistols never had those connections for me. But
They were sort of comedy band to me.
they
really,
had
at that time.
they didn't age well, I would say. The publicity around the Sex Pistols and all that stuff, and as I grow older, I appreciate the first Sex Pistols album weirdly more. But
It's a well-produced bit of pop.
yeah,
I think, really.
For someone who was 13 when the Sex Pistols came out, it was probably everything. It's that cold chamber thing. It's that this pissed off everybody, and this is mine.
Graham Culture. So Graham from John Culture said when he first heard it, it had the same effect, and he said he could not figure out what the sound was. He said he thought it was keyboards or something because he'd never heard anything that was just those really well produced big power chords.
Yeah.
And he just was like, I've got to find out how that's made.
Yeah.
I've got to find out how it happens.
But that Stiff Little Fingers one, it sounds so dirty. Everything sounds so filthy, but it sounds so good. That bass.
Oh, it's just because it's got dynamics. It's just I can see that listening to that. Then I was purposely listening to the bass, and there's a bit in
the
High
bass
Fidelity.
player's a great bass player.
Oh, but absolutely. Although when I saw them, he'd moved over to guitar. But there's a bit in High Fidelity, the film, where the guy's trying to show off to the girl who played Darlene in Roseanne. He's going, "Oh, if you love Green Day, you've got to hear Stiff Little Fingers because that's where Green Day got it all from." And they put on Stiff Little Fingers, and this guy looks up from the record racks, goes, "This is the new Green Day?" And I was thinking, how can anyone possibly confuse those two? But then the more I listened to sort of the parts of Stiff Little Fingers and go, that's Trey Cool. Is it Trey Cool? Yeah, he was the bassist, wasn't he? That's Trey Cool. That is entirely Trey Cool.
No, Trey Cool's the drummer. Mike Dirnt.
Oh shit! What was the name of the bassist? Robbie Weatherspoon or something.
Mike Dirnt.
Mike Dirnt.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed myself that Robbie Weatherspoon is the best comedy name I could come up with at short notice. So yeah, long live Stiff Little Fingers.
People said about that is about Rancid. Oh, they took everything from the Clash. I've never been able to make those links apart from the delivery by Joe Strummer and the delivery by Tim Armstrong. And I'd say Joe Strummer is less comical.
Joe Strummer doesn't sound like he's being strangled while he's doing his vocals.
Or he doesn't sound like he is actively... Yeah, I mean, Tim Armstrong just sort of sounds like he can't be bothered, whereas Joe Strummer sounds like he can't concentrate in a way.
ADHD vocals. The other thing that...
I'd say more speed vocals.
The other thing that completely changed my life with the Stiff Little Fingers was I heard my first exposure to the Sex Pistols was I was sleeping in a tent in a friend's garden. Dan, who was also in the band I was in when I was a kid, and somebody put this music on a tape player, and I was like, "What is this? What is this awful nonsense?" And it was Friggin' in the Riggin' by the Sex. I was like, "Yeah, it's Friggin' in the Riggin' by the Sex Pistols." So when I was told this is the Sex Pistols, I was like, "That's it. Why would I possibly listen to the Sex Pistols?" And yeah, there are some more slightly sort of political. Well, there is political stuff on the first Sex Pistols album, but Stiff Little Fingers was. If the Sex Pistols was vaguely political and talking about things in quite broad terms, Stiff Little Fingers was angry about very specific things.
Mm.
The Northern Ireland. I hate the word. I hate it when it's called the Troubles. About that, but also in a way that was not taking sides necessarily, just saying, what the fuck are you doing to me? What are you doing to us, essentially kids? And I've just looked it up. Jake Burns was 19 when Stiff Little Fingers started.
To be that,
when they released the first album, Suspect to Us, he was 21.
Yeah.
21. What an incredible, just remarkable thing.
But also, was it Mark Still who said, "Thank God for the Clash, because otherwise, Sex Pistols, otherwise punk rock would have just been unarticulated rage."
Yeah, good. What about television? English punk, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Right.
but that's that thing of like, I struggle personally. I love the first Television album, but I have struggled to make that connection between Television and punk rock. I know that they were the same scene as the Ramones, but making that link between the Ramones and the Sex Pistols and the Clash is a lot easier for me than even making the musical link from Television to the Ramones.
I was going to say, yeah, right. What about the Minutemen and punk? But yeah, they don't sound punk, but they absolutely are punk in every way.
Yeah.
We are going to have to march along and play this. What is that awful shit?
That's Ruins Alone, Stonehenge. That's the band that you didn't want to come and see, or you failed to come and see because you got your dates mixed up.
Oh shit! That's the that's the band I had a ticket for, and it was
Half of
only
the band.
in
Well, a third of the band.
only in the morning when
I was already
the
on
Dice app said, "Hey, remember, here's your tickets." I was like, "Tickets? What tickets?" Oh shit!
I love that, but that's that thing of like, what the to me it was. Here is, I don't know. I love Ruins Alone. This is a continuation of my love letter to Yoshida Tatsuya, the man behind Ruins Alone, and a load of other incredibly progressive, very strange bands. And like, I think he he's so sort of, his music sort of is so beyond what, he doesn't, he just sort of takes everything and makes it very extreme and very sort of strange and difficult to approach. And I think there's a punk rockness to it in that it's not it is progressive in that sort of traditional prog rock way, like time signatures are clever and a lot of tempo changes and all this sort of stuff, but it's also punk rock in its sort of speed and its approach to fuck you, I'm just going to do what I want, and I don't care if anybody turns up, I don't care if anybody gets it, I'm just going to have a do this. And it was that thing for me, it was sort of like, again, it was that sort of like, oh, this is something that I've discovered in a way by myself, but it was also I love the fact that it still alienates people, that it's still not approachable for even people who like difficult music, such as yourself. It still sort of makes people go, what the fuck's going on?
I find that challenging, but I like the fact it exists. So what's the track called?
Stonehenge.
No, we're not going to fucking do Stonehenge.
And
No,
also,
we're not going to fucking do Stonehenge.
No. But I also really appreciate the fact that for me, it sort of gave me permission to, as sort of like in writing music, to be as just confrontationally difficult as I wanted to be.
See, I'm confrontationally incompetent.
Well, I remember I tried when I was in Godzilla Black, I tried to write something along these lines for us to play, and I sent the track over, and it's all based on patterns. It's all based on like, it's not complete chaos. There's patterns within it. And I sent it along, and the drummer of Godzilla Black at the point just went, no, I don't get it. What the fuck's going on? And go, but it repeats itself. It's a pattern. He goes, no, I can't play that. No human can play what you put together on a computer sound. All right.
Right, we're going to have to move on. I love how like unnecessarily loud that bit of feedback is.
See, I find that much more unapproachable than Ruins Alone.
Right, I'm going to play the beginning, and it's a thick Scottish accent, but I want to see if you can pick out quite an important 2 words in this first line.
I know I would like some more tea, please.
Anyway, this is Prolapse, and the song is Headless in a Beat Motel, or as Mick, the singer, sings it in his Scottish accent, Headless in a Beat Motel. And that is where the name Beat Motel comes from.
Oh, wow.
It's from that track. And I chose it because we went to go and see them at Norwich Arts Centre, and I do not know how we even knew who they were. And they were really nice, and we hung out with them, and we were a little naffle of kids. And I can remember thinking, these are people, this is their job. This is what they do. This is their job. I want to do that. So, yeah, thanks to them for ruining my life as well. But we've spoken about them before, so I'm going to play this. Why do I find that so much less abrasive and so much more enjoyable than Ruins Alone? Honestly, I mean, genuine question. What's the difference? Who was it first? You want to tell me what it is?
Maybe punk rock, maybe more modern production.
Who was it?
That was Ornette Coleman with the track Free Jazz. And that is one of the most important albums in free jazz music. And yeah, I mean, I think it's quite listenable in like a 30-second snippet. Try listening to 40 minutes of it.
I was going to say that clip's from the 8-minute 40 mark.
Yeah.
It is long, and it came out in bloody hell 1961.
Yeah.
I've talked before about how some music when it came out must have sounded like it had come from another planet. That sounds like it came from another planet now.
Yeah. And it's an amazing album. It's basically 2 quartets, one in each ear.
No.
Yeah.
Oh man, I've got here another few seconds now to test that. That's bonkers.
And they played.
Oh man!
Apparently, the way they recorded it is they had 2 studios facing one another, and Coleman was sort of leading it. And my friend, our friend Andy, who lives up in Scotland, swears there's a point somewhere around the 18-minute mark where they all just snap into the same riff together. And he says he said it's like your brain is just relieved so much because you've had 18 minutes of this noise and difficulty, and then all of a sudden there's a sense of melody and there's a sense of timing, there's a sense of togetherness, and your brain just goes off like, fucking hell.
I think Ornette, it's ahead of its time because in the late 60s and 70s in America, the 8-track was popular, and the 8-track worked by you had a relatively short bit of tape, and each song was on a different. This is track in the recording studio sense of the word rather than a song.
Yeah.
And as I understood it, you played the tape, then you flipped a knob to listen to one of the other tracks, so they're all on the same bit of tape. So this is just ahead of its time. You got 2 albums here. If you listen to it on your stereo just by panning hard left or right,
yeah,
you have. So it's like having 2 albums.
Yeah. I don't know why. I just like that in a weird way because I came to jazz, I think, in reverse. A lot of people sort of like jazz from like the pretty melodies, and I always hated the pretty melodies, and I really don't like. I really still struggle with jazz that is what I find too clean and too sort of soft, and I like evidently like quite challenging, sort of chords and stuff like this. And so I sort of got into punk rock through getting more and more into noise music. And then there's a certain point where it crossed over and someone, you start listening to this. And so this is the point where I remember getting into sort of free jazz and trying to bring in sort of free noise aspects to the what was supposed to be the follow-up band of Piss Resistance when our singer had left the country and gone off to Australia. And we were going to continue, and we were going to sort of placate the drummer by doing weird time signatures, and we were going
Placate him. Normally a drummer would be like, what?
No, but I sort of wanted to do this moment of sort of just going, okay, we start the song, and then we're going to, at this end of this bar, we're just going to go into this sort of abstract zone, and we're going to stop playing a riff. We're going to stop playing like melodies and all this. We're just going to go for the free jazz moment, and then we look at each other and we come back into a riff. It'll be really powerful, it'll be really great, and you just go, but what's the count? What's the count? And it's like, there is no count. We look at each other. And that band lasted about 2 practices.
God, that long? Right, final track.
Have you got into Euro metal then?
No, do you know what? That is INSOMNIUM with Valediction.
Oh, so it is Euro metal. Yeah.
Okay, well, we talked about the Bluetones earlier. The Bluetones had a song title that I'm going to co-opt to explain my feeling about this. And they had a song called Autophilia, or then in quote marks, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Enjoy My Car. So this is INSOMNIUM, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Enjoy Metal.
Oh, bless, yeah.
Just to embrace it all. Embrace the Eurovision aspect of it. Embrace the growliness. Just embrace it all.
Do you think there was just something? There was something about this band that you just kept coming back to, despite an internal monologue that kept going. Really, Andrew? Really? I don't
know what it was.
What are you doing?
Well, yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, why do I like this? And it did just open a gateway to so many other things. Before that, I'd always I like metal, but I only like it if there's no Cookie Monster vocals. I only like it if there's no double kick. Just all these, I'll only like it if. Now I heard that and just went, well, that's got everything that I think I don't like, but I do like it. So there you go. Do you know what? You're looking out the window in exactly the same way as Martin Sheen in have you seen the Martin Sheen David Tennant thing called Scripted?
No, I think I've seen a little bit. No, there was just someone who passed the window. Our community sort of our housing people got a bit arsey recently, and they put up this whole private property thing. And ever since they put up these private property things saying no trespassers, I swear there's been more people who have run past.
Finnish people are like, fuck you.
It's just like, what the fuck? And this woman was just going for a run. So it was just, but I didn't expect someone to run past.
I'd be well shocked if someone run past. I'm in a Beat Motel Glamorous Studio B today, and basically, if someone run past, they'd have to defy gravity to get over the fence and not fall into next door's pond. Right.
No, I mean, I never got into that side of metal, but I can certainly see, I think, it's something to sort of celebrate whatever breaks down those walls for you. In the same
That's
way
good.
that,
Good way of putting it.
yeah.
Right, we are going to have to wrap it up there. So thanks for
Okay.
listening, everyone. Oh no, we've got some listener correspondence, which I'm just going to quickly do. So this is a comment on YouTube for the last episode by someone called Chris Lamont, and his comment is, "What a boring load of shite."
Thanks,
To which,
Chris.
to which I replied, "Mission accomplished." Because
I have to say, if you're on YouTube and you're watching people talk about music on YouTube, get a fucking life.
No, we're not gonna fucking do Stonehenge.